On Wednesday, George Osborne will unveil the first autumn statement and comprehensive spending review of Britain's fully Conservative administration. Now, the Chancellor is in a bit of a pickle, having committed to running a surplus by the end of this Parliament, having ruled out quite a number of possible tax hikes, and having really safeguarded many large government departments. So where's he going to find the money to bring down the deficit? And what's the state of Britain's public finances? Discussing this with me today is Chris Giles, the FT's economics editor. Now, Chris, let's first of all have a look at Britain's public finances. How are they doing?
Well, if we take a big step back and have a look at the debt of this country, it's been rising.
Have a look at the first chart.
Very quickly, as we can see here. It's been rising very quickly because there was a big deficit every year. But as you can see, it's stopped rising now. And in fact, this year, the Office for Budget Responsibility is expecting a slight fall once you get to the full year. This is only half the year, so it's still rising a touch right at the moment. So the debt burden has been rising very quickly, stabilised, and the government wants to now bring it down pretty fast by ultimately running a surplus. You can have falling debt when you still run a small deficit, so long as the deficit is growing slower than the size of the overall economy.
Right. And what's happening to the deficit then?
Well, the deficit, this is my favourite chart of the deficit. It shows the 12-month, the deficit over the most recent 12 months, month by month. You can see the last 12 months. And you see it went through phases through the recovery. It's been falling, it's been getting smaller, had a bit of a bad patch in 2013-14, then started to fall really quickly. But if you see, it's been tailing off again recently. And this is the forecast. So it's got to really accelerate again to hit the forecast this year. And this is why people are thinking that maybe this is a little bit over-optimistic, given the tail-off we've had recently.
So this is showing really Osborne's problem.
This is the problem this year, that it's quite hard if you think this line has to go and re-accelerate up to get to that point just there. So now, that's quite difficult.
How do we explain this gap? Let's have a look at the third chart. Which
it comes from tax revenues really not coming in as fast as expected, and public spending being a bit faster than expected. So it's on both sides. On the public spending side, you would think the government should be able to control expenditure by the end of the year, but the tax revenues is more difficult. And this chart shows us why. Tax revenues, normally we talk about real growth, real growth in the economy, how much bigger has the economy got when you adjust for inflation. But when you think about taxes, you pay taxes out of the amount of cash in the economy. And so you actually need to look at the nominal size. That's the cash size of the economy. And this is its growth rate. It was getting really to quite a good growth rate at 5% back in 2014. But that's been tailing off, and this is why tax revenues
That's because inflation is now around
inflation's
zero.
Very low. So even though the real growth in the economy is exactly as forecast, in fact maybe doing slightly better than forecast, the cash size of the economy has been tailing off. And if you're only going to get 3% growth in the cash size of the economy, it's quite hard to get 4% growth in tax revenues.
So let's have a look now at your final chart here.
And this just shows that every time they've had budgets recently, they've downgraded the amount of tax they expected to get, not by a huge amount, but you look at these numbers, that's all about 10-15 billion there by the end of the period in 2018. And so you do that a few times, and then your surplus at the end of your forecasting horizon in 2019-20 suddenly can easily disappear.
So what should we expect from Osborne on Wednesday? How is he going to juggle all this?
I think there's a few things. One, we can say that maybe they'll be a bit more optimistic about the first year than it seems off on that first chart, partly because they can control spending and partly because the tax revenue data won't be in the latest forecast because it came only last Friday and it was too late to be included. Secondly, we know the end point, he will still show a surplus because if he didn't, that would be a political calamity for the government. So, and he's made it pretty clear there will be a surplus right at the end. So I think we're going to see more borrowing in the first few years and then a tighter squeeze in the last few years. And then the big question then is what happens to the government departments that aren't protected. And
that includes like the Home Office,
justice, environment, housing, welfare, what is going to happen to tax credits, all of these things, there's still going to be huge cuts in those areas, and that's going to be the big story, just so that Osborne can get his surplus, which he's promised and was in the Conservative manifesto.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. So a lot of progress for Britain on the public finances, but still some quite steep challenges ahead for the man who's promised to bring Britain back into black by the end of the Parliament.